I suck at fighting games. What? I do! Beginning from 1976's Heavyweight Champ, fighting games have been a staple genre of the video game scene. Numerous arcade machines designed to eat their players' wallets as they pick their chosen fighter to duke it out in a chosen ring, evolving these days to versus matches pitting you against the best of the world over the net, or even in sanctioned tournaments which can get extreme, their own dramas evolving as players rise to and fall from the top. Fun fact, an older net friend of mine who was featured in some of the earliest streams that I did has these days made it as a commentator for the East Coast game tournament scene. And good on him for that. But yeah, competitive gaming, as I've more just accepted my motor control in my hands as crap, I've kind of just walled myself off from such as not having the appeal. Even though there's a lot of fun to be had with the characters involved in all sorts of fighting games and their crossover compatriots. And that's something we're doing this year. A short-term look at some adaptations of the stories and content from fighting games or series that involve fighting into other forms. Yes! Yes! And we're starting with the one that revolutionized them all, Street Fighter.
Quick! Change the channel!
No, not this one. Let me explain. Street Fighter was the game that really did add a lot of things fighting games from the decade before had been lacking. Innovative locations and set pieces, interesting characters, and a central protagonist that had one goal. Grow stronger, develop your capabilities through honing your own skill, and embarking to overcome the challenges you face. Said character, Ryu Hoshi, in his personal quest for unobtainable martial arts perfection, was a reflection of the player, as you too had to hone your skills and overcome your limitations to dominate at the game. There are few subtextual narratives about an experience that endured the same way as that. And subsequently, with the release of Street Fighter's sequel game, Street Fighter II in 1991, the near perfection of said game's mechanics for unlocking special attacks, intriguing characters with their own stories you want to see and learn more of, the introduction of the combo attacks and special move systems, it is impossible to even think of dissociating any fighting game from the foundation that Street Fighter ultimately built for the rest of the genre going forward. It is just that important, and while Capcom is much slower to release new Street Fighter titles, the various crossovers that Capcom has its cast take part in more than keeps the series alive and kicking, which unfortunately cannot be said of some of Capcom's other properties with versus aspects to them. The irony being, well, Street Fighter was not my first introduction to fighting games. No, that was Fatal Fury and the King of Fighters. Oh, Masami Obari's Fatal Fury OVAs, you will never not have a special place in my heart. Why has Andy Bogard not asked Mai Shiranui to marry him yet? I am invested in them finally tying the knot, damn it. Well, I tell a bit of a lie there. My first exposure to media based around fighting games was the DiC animated adaptation of the game Double Dragon, which I had no idea was a fighting game adaptation. The series is weird, and also one of several in this just boom of adaptations of fighting game material that was done in the 90s to capitalize on their immense popularity, which also had other Western cartoons based on the property in weird ways. The Street Fighter cartoon ultimately resulted from this zeitgeist, and it's terrible, only truly topped in how terrible it is by the Darkstalkers cartoon made a year later, and both likewise pale in comparison to the anime adaptations of both series. Guess what is another series that we're going to be talking about during this? Beyond Fatal Fury and the Darkstalkers connection, my only other outreach into adaptations of fighting game anime series which I was in any way invested in was the Street Fighter II V anime series released originally in 1995. That 29-episode anime I saw in the mid-2000s on late-night cable broadcast, and I honestly have fond feelings for it, and would love if someone would finally recollect the series. But yes, because Street Fighter is foundational to literally every fighting game after it, that's why it's up first on the chopping block of looking at adaptations of their material. Though, as I said, we're not going to be looking at the infamous live-action film because doing so by web reviewers has been done to death. Though, as I'm guessing some people will just want my 2 cents on the matter as well, just like, okay, look, I love the live-action Street Fighter movie. It is hilarious, campy gold at its finest, and actually gets the characters a lot more right than the awful Western cartoon, which, yeah, that cartoon is so awful that this is fantastic in comparison. It is impossible to hate Raul Julia in his final role as M. Bison, and that film is insanely quotable and just fun.
I'm sorry. I don't remember any of it.
I know it's not a good adaptation of the Street Fighter mythos, but damn it, dissociated from all that, and it puts a smile on my face when I watch it. Hell, it's under most circumstances more faithful than efforts that followed it with regards to fighting game adaptations. The Legend of Chun-Li, anyone? And really, the worst part about that movie is actually Jean-Claude Van Damme, as that guy could not be paid to act at any point in the film. And honestly, with the numerous reevaluations that movie has gone through the last 2 years, with re-review of it after re-review of it, the memes that have resulted from it, some of which I've used myself on numerous occasions, it's hard to plumb any further the depths of that movie to talk any more of that adaptation outside of, I like this, or I hate this, so you would not get a substantive review of it out of me or anyone else at this point. Instead, we're going to talk about what is consequently an overlooked adaptation, Street Fighter II, the animated movie, which is a film-condensed version of the game that kicked off the revolution towards that game genre. And in reality, this movie released first of all the adaptations of Street Fighter, hitting theaters in August of 1994, while the Raul Julia and Van Damme movie would only follow 4 months later. Though if you've not seen the film, it really does not look it. With a story written by Kenichi Imai, directed by Gisaburo Sugi, and animated by Group TAC, this film honestly looks like something made far later, lining up with what would be expected from hand-drawn animation of the late 90s, not something that started its production in 1992. Though if you've never heard the name Kenichi Imai, well, I can't find anything about the guy either. His sole credit I'm aware of are just on these early adaptations of Street Fighter, penning this film and the 2V anime, as well as being credited as producer for the live-action movie, and unfortunately also the awful 1995 cartoon. Gisaburo Sugi, though, is a much older name for Japanese animation directors, bearing a long history of culturally influential work dating back to the Astro Boy anime, as well as Lupin the Third Part 1 and the 1996 film for the series Secret of the Twilight Gemini, one of my favorite 90s Lupin events. The guy is still around as well even into his 80s as he hasn't retired, though he has taken on less and less work for obvious reasons. Group TAC, however, not so much. While Sugi was frequently a director for them, and they did such series as Those Who Hunt Elves, Flint the Time Detective, some episodes of the 90s Superman the Animated Series, Beautiful Joe, and, of all things, the series Grenadier the Beautiful Warrior. And no, I will not apologize for owning this. Well, unfortunately, over time, their adaptations just stopped getting attention, their last major production years being 2004 and 2006, with there being a hard split with members of their staff in 2005, who left to form Studio Barcelona, which is now known as Dio Media, after which TAC started hemorrhaging money thanks to the declined television animation experience during the later end of the decade. Which is just sad, as there's a number of series Group TAC worked on that I feel went above and beyond what was expected back in the day. But hey, a lot of those series have been preserved. It's just 2V that's missing from the greats of their library at this point. And who knows, we might see that recollected soon enough. Regardless of all that, the Discotek release of the film is likely the best version of the film you're all likely to find. The special features on the disc go pretty in-depth to the development process of the film, with several different cuts of the base movie having been originally created when the film was first imported due to its graphic nature. The US version originally only having a PG-13 release, while the UK version was far more unrated, though both did originally cut down scenes from the movie that dragged for purpose of pacing, but also for varied types of censorship that were edited differently between national cuts, and both using different incidental and background audio tracks than the original film had because, well, that was a thing back in that era. But unfortunately, the dubs of the film aren't actually considered that good, thanks to the lacking skills of ADR director Kevin Seymour. I've not talked about him before, but Kevin Seymour is a bit infamous for directing, well, flat performances from those he is working with. It's something that has bled over onto the careers of the actors he would direct, and stigmatized many of them, which is not cool. As a consequence, it made for something of a headache for Discotek, as due to all the censorship, cuts and edits and audio changes, it made for a proper reconstruction of an uncut dub of the film using the original Japanese film more problematic. But as I have been saying as of late, well, the Discotek team just end up being wizards with older content and restoration, and managed to make both US and UK dubs of the film perfectly fit with the unedited Japanese master video copy, and used long-saved master copies of the dub audio from their original recordings to make it so you also have the option of playing the entire film with the original dub, but also with that dub using the Japanese background tracks, fully completing and undoing the unnecessary localization changes, making for the absolute most complete experience of the film for the first time in the entire history of its existence. Anyways, we open on the narrative cliche of a dark and stormy night. Street Fighter central protagonist Ryu Hoshi in the middle of a match with one of his greatest rivals of the franchise, Sagat. This proving itself to be the origin fight of Sagat's signature scar, given to him thanks to his bouts with Ryu when he counters Sagat's final move with his Shoryuken. Because of course, no one can stand up to the power of a rising dragon fist. Maybe it has something to do with those that have the power of the Fist of the North Star. However, amidst their bout, something, or someone, has been spying on them, cataloging their abilities, and determining their power rating, all for their own schemes. In London, however, that scheme is already in play, the British intelligence agent Cammy White attacking the Prime Minister of London and snapping his neck, before being captured by his useless security guards. Footage of the incident is reviewed by the lead heroine of the series, Chun-Li of Interpol, who's determined this attack was perpetrated by the organization Shadow Law, who had subsequently brainwashed Cammy when she had attempted to infiltrate them and consequently become their sleeper agents. By the way, Shadow Law, Shadow Lu. Honestly, Shadow Law makes more sense as an organization. Hell, as I said, Discotek's Blu-ray release utilizes the Japanese master version of the film, and there's not any English mistranslations there. Shadow Lu is one of those things that, well, the original import of the game screwed up, which then subsequently stuck. It's recognized by Capcom to officially be a mistranslation, much like the name roulette between Vega and Bison and Balrog. Or likewise, Street Fighter being the origin of misromanizing any Japanese character named Guy with the spelling G-U-Y instead of G-A-I. And yeah, that naming roulette, that is its own entire mess. And Bison, as we know him, was originally the character D. Vega. Balrog, as we know him, was originally M. Bison, as the entire character was a spoof of boxer Mike Tyson. And Balrog, actually, I don't know what was up with Balrog. Regardless though, as this is the Japanese master version footage, in this scene that goes over profiles of these involved characters, well, this is why you see the different names. Those were their original names before Capcom USA realized that the name similarities about the boxer Bison might lead to a lawsuit from Mike Tyson, so they were changed around. Though even with the change, honestly, Bison still kind of works as a central villain name, due to how the related character has a thing about power and domination. Cattle in several nations were worshipped as deities, and the horns of such often co-opted for mythos around evil monsters and demons the world over. You can see the whole crimson-clad devil thing still working for the man. Anyways, Cammy was Shadow Law's prototype for a new breed of assassins, using the elite martial artists of the world as sleeper agents, and a private army that can outfight anything possibly thrown against them. Their leader, the infamous madman M. Bison, having recruited Sagat, Balrog, and Vega already into their forces as willing participants, making it so an elite team of fighters needs to be collected to counter them and the martial prowess they have at their disposal. Now, one might reason, hey, couldn't a trained military team go in and do this without having a bunch of Street Fighter civilians and special agents do the job? My response being, 1, then there's no story, and 2, have you seen the lack of actual training several militaries have had? A lot of them fail against common civvy guerrilla tactics in urban environments. I'd put my money on the trained martial artist any day. Though speaking of military backup...
Captain Guile! Someone from Interpol is here to see you!
Well, Guile's theme does go with everything. And unsurprisingly, Guile is an ass, not caring about his orders as long as he can kick Bison's ass. Okay, maybe the acting of Jean-Claude Van Damme as the character wasn't such a stretch. He still actually didn't act in this film. Meanwhile, at Shadow Law headquarters, hidden inside the statue of a foreign deity, the private army of M. Bison is shown in its full splendor, as Bison and his elite team arrive. And man, does this come off as having a level of Star Wars directorial inspiration, though that is not too surprising. Both Star Wars Empire and Shadow Law both draw visual inspiration from fascist and imperialistic regimes, their uniform worn by Bison's officers and himself drawing direct inspiration from stripped-down Nazi regalia, due to the character and his entire faction deliberately trying to invoke the themology of the archetypes of oppressive, controlling evils. What are they looking at? That's just the way they came from. I mean, it can't be this guy. He just came from a side door. The same for this artificial warrior they just invented.
Androids? Actually, the technical term is cyborgs.
Androids!
But to Bison, well, screw having a subservient robot army. He won't be happy until he has the world's strongest working for him.
But sir, do you really think that this man Ryu is as powerful as the computer analysis rates him?
I mean, his power level hasn't even reached 9,000. But yeah, Bison recognizes that anyone as powerful as Ryu not working for him is a threat to him. But as truly malicious people are wont to do, they end up setting up their own downfall by antagonizing people like this just to bring about their own terms of control. This leads us to finding Ryu up training in the mountains, reminiscing on his old days of training against his best friend Ken under Master Sho, trying to find the next way to push himself forward. He heads into town, where he's shanghaied into an underground fighting ring against a random fighter, which ends up being overseen by long-standing martial artist turned cinema icon, Fei Long. Fei Long has been a bit of an unlucky Street Fighter character as of late, for similar reasons to the whole Bison-Tyson thing, as Fei Long drew inspirational basis from the legendary martial artist and actor Bruce Lee, who despite being dead for 50 years at this point, is still widely respected and well regarded as an inspiration and individual to emulate for both fighters and stuntmen. That association has never escaped Fei Long as a result, primarily because the character was meant to be a tribute in honor of him. However, in 2022, Street Fighter's development team considered retiring Fei Long from the Street Fighter roster, such being stated in those terms by team member Daniel Lindholm, who said he spoke to Lee's family about such a decision. Turns out, no, they had at no point talked to the family of Bruce Lee about the character, but they had only assumed that his presence would no longer be welcome in the Street Fighter series, thanks to the controversy caused by Quentin Tarantino, who notoriously hates Bruce Lee and derisively mocks, slanders, and co-opts the iconography of Lee for the sole purpose of demystifying it in nearly every movie Quentin Tarantino has ever made. Such coming to a head with the 2019 film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, at which point people who actually knew Lee personally started slamming Tarantino for, well, let's call it what it is, his racism towards Bruce Lee, one of the best Hollywood martial artists and stuntmen in history who redefined how fight scenes and stunts are performed in filmmaking, and Tarantino doing nothing but decry his actual capabilities as overinflated arrogance, which, yeah, is a complete lie. The backlash Tarantino caused is more the problem than anything the Lee family themselves are responsible for in the current era regarding Fei Long's use as a character. The Street Fighter dev team afterwards backpedaled on this decision, saying it was more of a hypothetical situation, which really just goes to show that some people just don't know what they're doing. If Fei Long doesn't end up appearing in Street Fighter content or any crossover game going forwards, well, just remember to blame Tarantino for his racist shit and not Lee's family, as they're fine with him. Regardless, with Ryu one-hit KOing his opponent, Fei Long steps in to try and get into a serious bout, and yeah, the Bruce Lee influence is openly on display here. The pair trading hits blow for blow, and it being an all-out even bout. It ultimately only being decided by Ryu pulling out one of his special moves. And with context of the Bruce Lee controversy, honestly, I don't think this was a bad depiction. Yeah, the Lee analog lost, but he was giving Ryu a run for his money the entire time. That's different than an XP or fictionalized representation of the man being literally bitch-slapped into defeat as Tarantino kept doing. As if you're going to write a character losing a fight in a way that respects them and whatever legacy they might represent, you have to at least sell that at some point in it that they might have had a winning chance. Besides, we all know that Street Fighter's actual gag character is Dan Hibiki! From Fei Long, though, Ryu learns of what Sagat's been up to, and the current threat of Shadow Law, them being small-time drug and arms dealers that recently have decided to move into making it big for themselves as a world power. That's why they're trying to build their world warrior army. Though speaking of Shadow Law's targets, Ken's seen having a fight with the Native American character T-Hawk, though the movie does not get into T-Hawk's reasoning for the challenge, which, as you'd expect, relates to Shadow Law. As in the game storyline, Bison burned his tribe's land and stole his girlfriend, only to brainwash her into his elite guard. So T-Hawk's desire to become strong to fight Bison leads him to challenge other strong people, and in this case, Ken was his target of the moment. T-Hawk is one of a number of expanded roster characters from the many Street Fighter II expansions and ports, thus explaining at the time why he really does not have a character, at least as presented in the film. Cammy earlier in the movie had the same problem. She was also one of those expanded roster characters, thus explaining her very brief use here. When you're aware of that, their lacking involvement in the story makes more sense, as there was less to build on them at the time. The same can be said of the Dark Hado Master Akuma, who in the very next scene makes a cameo appearance despite how significantly huge an antagonist he is, considering he's the single most broken, powerful character in the franchise. His creation came later than the source material this story was originally based on, thus while it's important to include them in some capacity, the story is not essentially theirs like it is for other characters. Like Dulcim and A Honda, who were among the original roster, and we see engaging in a street fight so they have some time in the spotlight, despite the story more focused on others. Regardless, Ken's fight being overseen allows Shadow Law to begin to pin down the details they need regarding Ryu's abilities. And if Ryu's not available, Ken would make a fair replacement for their Psycho Soldiers. However, Bison's chief scientist raises the concern that Chun-Li might be able to get something workable out of Cammy while she's in their custody, leading to Bison sending Vega to silence her. Permanently. While Chun-Li herself is in the midst of a spat with Guile, trying to get the asshole military officer to actually work with her, considering they both have a beef with Bison killing those close to them, just with Chun-Li putting the job before her own desires, while Guile is, well, an ass. And I appreciate Chun-Li getting the chance to put him in his place.
I'd like Bison myself, because he killed my father.
I'm sorry. I don't remember any of it. The day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
Really, Chun-Li's the better execution of someone taking the long way, the right way, of seeking justice for a lost loved one, while Guile's using that loss to act like a jerk to everyone around them and do what they want. Still, it gets through to the guy that he's not helping anyone and will be losing his chance at Bison if he doesn't play nice. Guile providing a lead in the form of the add-on character named DJ, who's been actively under surveillance. Chun-Li breaking the drone that was following him.
It's a monitor cyborg.
Cyborgs need organic components to count. They're androids. Androids! But it's at this point Vega's sent after her, just as Chun-Li's finishing up her infamous shower scene that would be subsequently repeated in a half-dozen fighting game anime adaptations over the next several years. I mean, I do a montage of how ubiquitous it became, but 1. Content restrictions for YouTube videos. 2. That's not how I run my show. And 3. If you're just there for the new girl, why not just buy the damn film yourselves? Still, with regards to the full scene, Vega's assault on Chun-Li goes full slasher villain with how it's paced and toned. Chun-Li having to fight off her assaulter, and even with his bladed claw and her with naught but a loose shirt on her, she literally kicks Vega's ass, defenestrating him out of her apartment. I would actually like to see a slasher film where the main heroine of it is actually overqualified for taking out the slasher villain they end up facing off with. Yeah, we have the awesomeness of Laurie Strode as portrayed by Jamie Lee Curtis from the Halloween franchise, and a few different heroines of the Jason films where Freddy Krueger's victim surviving, but that's the key difference. They're survivors, lasting against the monster they faced through the skin of their teeth and learning from it for future encounters. It's far less common for them to actually face off and directly fight back against their antagonist out of the gate. I want to see an aliens get away from her you bitch moment from such. I actually think that's part of why this fight in particular for the film stands out. Chun-Li is not a victim archetype. She is a strong fighter in her own right, ambushed in her home in a vulnerable moment. Only takes the significant damage she does because of the claw Vega has while she herself is unarmed, and yet despite her assailant being one of the strongest individuals in the world and a sociopathic serial killer at that, she still beats him at his own game. However, the blood loss from the slashes she did suffer from Vega's claw does mean that Chun-Li is going to be out of the main event so she can recover. But it's a more legitimate rationale than other, later events would try to pull, where said media would have the girl defeated only for the Guile equivalent character in the situation to not just save her, but beat their opponent and take over their duty and role. And you can't say that doesn't happen. That's a staple of such. While this depiction, despite being done in 1994, acts as a significant exception. Like, say what one will of the awful Legend of Chun-Li movie, I think we can all admit that we were initially interested in it by premise alone due to Chun-Li being an engaging character in her own right. Plus, Neil McDonough could have played a decent Bison if given the proper material, as shown by his later tenure as Damien Dark in the Arrowverse series. But I did not select that movie for review for a reason. While the live-action 94 Street Fighter film is hilarious and thus is let off the hook for its bad elements, The Legend of Chun-Li, by comparison, is just plain bad with how bad it botched, well, everything. There's a reason that film is on the list of the worst films ever made. But it's at this point that Ken is confronted directly by Bison, digging at Ken's sore spot over his constant failures against Ryu in always being behind the Wandering Warrior in capability to try and get an in with him. And when that doesn't work,
what happened to the purity of unarmed combat?
Hey, what kind of a punch you call that?
This is merely superconductor electromagnetism. Surely you've heard of it.
what? One of my favorite psychics is an Electromaster, and such gives her most of Bison's moveset.
Your pathetic efforts are futile against my psycho power.
Psycho power?
Yeah, his suit is lined with a Seikomu system. Damn you new types, you always ruin everything! This is one of the few times that useless-ass psychic powers are shown to be not so useless. Bison bodying Ken with little shown effort. So now he has his guinea pig. Guile too late to even do anything. Also, it's been night for like 3 or 4 consecutive days now. Can we get a day scene, or has this become the Darkstalkers OVA all of a sudden? Unfortunately, the anti-Shadow Law unit doesn't have a good idea of where Shadow Law's central base of operations is. The best they can estimate might be Thailand due to many of their activities commonly intersecting with the country. And then suddenly they do know and are planning their attack on it? I'd asked if the dub script turned over 2 pages at once, but no, I watched the film with the English dub and the Japanese subs on at the same time. And they do go from not knowing where Bison's base is to being about to assault it in half a jump cut. I get the idea that there was supposed to be a time skip at this point between scenes, but there's no real distinction of that occurring. Just the implication that Bison has had an open opportunity to play with his Ken doll here to twist his envy towards Ryu into a means by which to control him, even as Ryu in his travels once again reminisces fondly on their training, which has been a recurring byline throughout the film, the movie regularly intercutting between these scenes. Ryu's, as shown, are always in a positive light. How when the two trained together, they always looked out for one another, while in Ken's, it was always about how Ken always flagged behind Ryu and had to make up the difference, only for him to feel like he always fell short. It is two views on the relationship that, despite how it's not centrally focused on, forms an emotional core of the film. Ryu's continuing travels being to constantly seek to improve, to not disappoint his best friend, and make their time apart worth it to provide the best challenge he can, while Ken has only seemed to grow more and more frustrated by Ryu's absence, as he feels he's stagnated at what he feels is his peak, which to him is still not good enough. The juxtaposition over time foreshadows the ultimate culmination of the plot between them as the film begins to intertwine these smaller plot threads into the final act. Though because Bison's planned all this to claim Ryu, Sagat's prevented from getting his rematch with the man, which is the entire reason he joins Shadow Law to begin with, making him have second thoughts about this all as he's ordered to kill Cammy and Vega. Guile at this point makes contact with Ryu, explaining what's been up with Shadow Law. Ryu disbelieving, only for this to be when Bison sics the violent incarnation of Ken on Ryu, him moving too fast for Ryu to properly counter, and Bison keeping Guile from interfering. Balrog subsequently occupying Honda as well. And while Balrog and Honda are a double KO, Psycho Power is too much for Guile to even attempt to match, especially as Guile never once attempts to turtle or spam Sonic Boom. I mean, the one he tried missed entirely. That trait doesn't exactly work when your enemy has the power of quantum teleportation. Still seems Bison let Ken out of the brainwashing tube a bit too early. As with seeing Ryu in pain from his merciless assault, Ken starts to break through the mind control, as it too deeply echoes the moments of their youth for Bison to maintain control.
You worthless pile of excrement.
See, that's a takedown I expect Bison to do to Don. Honestly, though, dude, your own damn fault for trying to rush to your goal. But then again, that is always these monsters' Achilles' heel. As soon as they near achieving their goals, they start cutting corners until it's too late to correct the errors. But because of what Bison's done to his best friend, Ryu is more than up to kick Bison's ass, and it's not like Guile would ever be able to do it himself.
Something wrong, Colonel? Come here prepared to fight a madman, and instead you found a god?
The problem towards that being that Ryu's already been beaten pretty badly from his brawl with Violent Ken. Thus an Immaculate Bison, yeah, that's a steep hurdle. One Ryu is entirely jobbed against, once more Bison unable to be touched. He gives him the Vader speech, Ryu refusing, and Ken recovers his mind, centering himself despite fear of Bison that paralyzes him by using words their sensei passed on to him. Do you need some help getting your fist out of that, Ken? Bison is so angered by Ken throwing off his brainwashing, he decides, screw with the psychic powers, he'll crush them with his fists. This ultimately leads to his downfall, as with two opponents, he can't focus his capabilities as well, taking several hard blows from both, before subsequently being pinned and hit with a full force of a double. Bison appears to have been defeated, but as this is Street Fighter, none of the main cast of characters are ever down forever. This just stalling Bison's current schemes as his base is subsequently raided without him there to lead the counteroffensive. Which is all as expected, for such archetypical organizations only continue to function if their leader is around. Though this bears a question about a loose plot thread. What happened to Sagat? Still, Ken and Ryu part on good terms, finally having caught up with one another, despite the different paths they've taken to remain equals, despite their time apart. both of them returning to their preferred lives. What? What? Honestly, that's probably the best place to end this on. Just a single frame of the insanity that permeates fighting games like this. But yeah, this movie is great, and precedes most of the dreck of game adaptations to really stand out as something taken seriously. At least originally. Like I said at the start, Street Fighter redefined fighting games, and everyone and their mother was out to copy it after the fact. And it's telling when no adaptation of a fighting game, besides again Street Fighter 2V, really got anywhere near close to this for a long time. Its only rivals realistically being the Fatal Fury OVAs and movie, and really, that all I feel is its own beast because it's a more personal story that continues on into sequels to become a larger tale. But this more encapsulates the Street Fighter 2 story and its various cast members, with all given at the very least little moments and good short fights for the principal assembled characters. And of course, with Guile preemptively getting his ass kicked and Ego Bruce in the film, as even Japan already knew how the live-action Street Fighter that would follow would go with the title actors part of it. So all in all, if you're looking for an older, basic look towards the Street Fighter catalog before a ton of lore expansions and characters were added, and wanted the core central story to shine, then this would be it. But as I said, this is not the only fighting game adaptation I'm doing, and next time we swing back to them, well, let me put it this way. It takes two to Tekken.